All right. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another session of Low Code Perspectives. And today we have with us one of our Zoho partners, Christopher Mowers from AspenTech, who is also a Zoho team lead. Hi, Christopher. It's a pleasure to have you here with us. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So, could you please introduce yourself to the audience here?
Sure. My name is Christopher Mowers. I am the Zoho team lead at AspenTech CRM. We are a Zoho partner based in Novi, Michigan, USA. I am also a developer and I work every day to customize and extend the Zoho product and to help our customers simplify their businesses using Zoho and low code solutions.
That's awesome. And I did a bit of research on on you, and I found out that you're also an adjunct professor. So could you tell us what that is all about?
Sure, I'm an adjunct instructor at Henry Ford College as well. I'm not teaching at the moment, but I've helped to teach, people that are just getting into the field, just expressing interest, learning the very fundamentals of how to program,
All
and
right.
it's been
So
that's been
you
really rewarding.
so you are a proper programmer. What languages do you teach them?
Well, I won't list all the languages I worked with, but Python is the language that I teach primarily.
All right. So I just called you a programmer, and this is something that I've always wanted to know, and I'm sure a lot of us also would like to know. What exactly is the difference between a coder, a programmer, and a developer, and when do you actually use these terms?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love the question. And they're used, I mean, as you know, they're used somewhat casually and interchangeably, right? And I think probably everyone has a little bit of a different idea. Here's how I think about it. I think of coding and being a coder as sort of a very specific sort of a thing. You know, a coder writes code, and I don't think there's much more to it than that, right? So if you're writing code, you're a coder. I don't see very many job titles that are, coder because usually there's much more to a job than literally the act of writing code. A programmer I see as being a little bit less specific, a little bit more broad. We do see some job titles where someone might be referred to as a programmer. Coding certainly traditionally has been a big part of programming, but programming also encompasses, I think, the planning of code. I would say, like how do we write good code? How does code accomplish what we want it to accomplish? Programmers live in the world of triggers, inputs, processing, outputs, that kind of a thing. And then we get to developer, and I think we see a lot more job titles with developer, right? And I think of a developer, especially in today's context, as a builder of applications. And certainly there's a lot of overlap with programming and coding. I think especially traditionally, like I said, we think of those sort of somewhat interchangeably. But I think, as I'm sure we're going to get into today, I think in some sense, many of us are developers, even if we don't code. It's, if you're producing applications, if you're thinking with the users and the stakeholders in mind, you're thinking about their needs and you're designing something and implementing something that's going to affect them in some way, then I think you're a developer. I think that's where we're at now today.
Right, right. That's a wonderful explanation, giving us like a clear differentiation between all those three terms. So, what would you call yourself as?
I am a developer for sure.
Right.
I feel very strongly about that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So, on that note, how do you think low code is changing the application development spectrum in today's world? What's the scene like? What's the landscape like?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's really incredible. There are a couple of key things I would really emphasize, and there's a lot of reading out there that you can do. I know Gartner produces a lot of reports on this, PMI, as well as Zoho, but a couple of key factors and things that are happening. First of all, low code it means rapid development, right? It produces applications much faster, with much less expense because you simplify the process drastically. In most of these platforms, you're able to drag and drop or similar in ways that produce in sort of a 3-tier application, produce your data layer and produce your presentation layer basically simultaneously, at least a basic version of it. And then you're just coding the application later. All your coding is business logic, which speeds things dramatically. And speed typically means reduction in costs, right? And fewer missed opportunities, things of that nature. The second key thing I would say is, as we were alluding to with the developers, more people can be developers. We still need people who are very, very well versed in the highly technical programming languages, but there are lots of situations where enterprise IT, for example, is just bogged down. And if you need some little accounting helper application, not your big accounting system or something like that, but just something to help manage some little process, and you've got a smart business user that knows how to put stuff together, today they're probably doing it in a spreadsheet. They're probably already doing it, and they're probably doing it in some sort of okay, shadowy way with a spreadsheet. Low-code tools allow you to do this the right way, in a way that's governed, and puts power in the hands of those business users without them having to invest years to get to a high technical proficiency. And then the third thing I would say is just everyone needs integration, everyone needs scalability, and these low-code platforms just allow for that. I mean, Zoho Creator is the one that I work with, and all these integrations are relatively simple and straightforward to develop and implement. And so you can have flow of data, you can have single sources of truth in ways that these more shadowy methods or working on paper, things like that, just don't have.
Right. So maybe to summarize, it would be speed, and then democratization application development, and number
Yeah,
three is unification of all the different moving parts, right?
absolutely. Yes.
So, if you had to give an example to us in your earlier projects, which you have probably done with your traditional development methods, and the one that you have done today with low code, how drastically has been the time difference in building those particular applications? Just to give us an example.
Yeah, I mean, it is somewhat tough to compare, but I would say I don't know, if I were just to take a very rough guess, maybe a factor of 5 to 10. I mean, you're not building authentication. You're not building a database. You're not, in most cases, writing, a web page or some other interface. It's just tremendously faster. And one of the reasons why it's hard really to figure it out is because, and one of the things I love about low code is it allows us as consultants to work more collaboratively with our stakeholders. So in many organizations that we work with, we have users in those organizations that shoulder some of this development work with us, something that would be pretty unheard of in a traditional environment. So that's another factor too that makes it a little bit hard to nail down a number.
Right. All right. So, what type of applications or use cases are best suited for low code development? And are there any scenarios where low code might not be the ideal choice?
Sure. Yeah, I think the sort of the typical answer here is that low code is great for prototypes, for internal tools, things like that, right? And it is. It absolutely is. And if you want to just jump into something, those are great places to start. Like I said, if you're doing it in a spreadsheet today, it's like that's for me a no-brainer. Go try a low-code tool to build out something similar, but with multi-user access and things like that. But I will say that I wouldn't automatically rule out from the get-go any use case for low code, especially as tools become more sophisticated and can handle, various types of regulatory compliance and things like that. Factors are rolling out, or tools are rolling out two-factor authentication, things of that nature. I think that my default is to start with low code. Like when I'm presented a new project, I first think like, okay, how would I build this in a tool like Zoho Creator? I think the places to consider not going low code would be if particular risks are present that would drive someone to build an application that's more closely tied maybe with their existing technology, something like that, where an integration is going to be more trouble than it's worth. Or also if your application has a very high computational complexity, probably low code alone is not going to do it. But I will say there are ways to prop up low code applications. I think we'll talk more about that, either with something else on the back end or with more and more these sort of serverless web services that are available to handle something that might have been previously computationally complex for you. You can find services that will handle that and integrate. And so a low code becomes more and more appealing for a broad set of use cases, I would say.
Right. So you said that it's not any use case that wouldn't be a right fit. Like you wouldn't rule out any use case and you would start with low code. But if there is any complex integration, then you would consider how to include low code or how to make low code a part of the whole set, right? This brings me to the next question that I had in mind for you is regarding co-coding. So this is a term that's gaining popularity in these days. It's called co-coding, right? Where you have low-code tools and you're combining them with traditional methods of coding as well with your pro code as well. So how do you think this coexistence, would fare for application development? How is co-coding valued today, and how do you think it's crucial in the application development journey of any business or any organization?
Yeah, I think it's really great. I'm a big fan of it. Basically, you'll run into certain scenarios in more complex applications, like we were saying, where just you're not going to be granted sufficient execution in your low code environment, whether it's some very complex computation that has to happen, or comparison operations, or things like that. And it's going to make more sense to use a more traditional platform. These low-code tools, I mean, Zoho Creator, again, is the one that I'm most familiar with. They allow for API-based integration. And we do a lot of this where we'll use a product like Zoho Catalyst and build a more traditional but serverless application, and integrate essentially our own API gateway. And so you can have, like, if you're in an organization and you have some other formal IT team, or if you have developers that this is their world and they can build things like that, then you have, I think, a really great environment for citizen developers, business users to build on low code, and for your IT team to only have to build some back-end services that are just sort of too complex for the low code environment. And then again, you have this nice governance model that works with that, where you know what's going on with your data, and what people are touching, and you can share these resources. I mean, the great thing about building an API gateway is now you can use that same computation for multiple points of entry, right? So if you have a low code app, if you have a website, if you have, I don't know, a mobile app or something like that, now the computation can be shared and the resources can be shared, and you get the economy of scale too. So in general, I mean, it's obviously more complex. That would be the downside, right? Like if it can be done just in the low code app, great. I would say do it that way. But those hybrid approaches really enable low code apps to be quite powerful.
Right. So all for co-coding, all for coexistence and collaboration, right? All right. So I wanted to understand. Often we come across a lot of developers who think that low code might be, I wouldn't say a threat exactly, but might be like, oh, okay, low code. So then I'm a developer, right? And then there's low code development. So what does that mean? So have you personally gone through that thought, because you have the proper programming background, the computer science background, then you have transitioned to being a low code developer. So have you ever had that question in your mind, like, hey, so now what does this mean for me as a developer, right? What does it mean to developers in general? What do you think about that? You get where I'm getting, right? Like just a
Yeah.
question, or is this the space?
I did grapple with that when I first came into this segment of the industry, because like you said, I had been doing all this training, and I had to just consider my career path, and I think, like, is this where I want to be? Is this the best use of my skills and my knowledge? And what I've come to realize is that the real value that you have as a developer It's not your knowledge of a particular tool or a particular language. And I know like a lot of us really derive a lot of joy and a lot of satisfaction from really mastering a technology, which is great. That's great. But if you look at the trajectory of technology, if you look at the languages and the tools that have come and gone, staking your reputation on I'm a really great Python developer, I'm a really great C# developer, whatever, it's insufficient. It's insufficient for the long term. And so it's awesome that you've mastered something. That's terrific and you should be proud of it. But don't stake your future on that alone. And the thing that seems to be much more timeless, in my opinion, is your ability to make good software. And that translates across all tools. That translates from like the most complex language you'll work with to a low code or no code tool, because it's about people, it's about the users, it's about their experience, it's about making their businesses better, making the world better. That is, for me anyway, at the heart of being a developer, and that's what I've learned. And honestly, now that I've made that decision internally, I love low code because I get to get my ideas out that much faster. I get to help people that much faster. And I have the technical skills in my back pocket should we need to get more complex, but I just use that when I need to. I don't run to that with every solution, only when I have to.
That's very, very, very well said. Wonderfully put, right? At the end of the day, being a developer is about what the users want, and with technology always changing, we'll have to adapt to it. And I love it. I just love the answer. I wasn't able to rephrase it exactly, but thank you for that. It's brilliant.
Of
So,
course.
what are some common misconceptions or challenges developers might face from while transitioning from traditional coding to low-code development, and how do you think those challenges can be overcome?
Yeah, I think the first one, getting to what we were just saying, I think the first one is maybe being a little bit of dismissive of it. And I would say just go try something. Just go try to build something. See what it's like. You'll find that it is a world unto itself, right? And you can build up just as much technical knowledge in the low code world. The second one I would say is that the constraints are different. And this is something I've actually run into a lot in sort of training other developers, is that sometimes when people come to low code tools, they get really frustrated about the constraints. Like, what do you mean I can only execute this line of code this many times and then it fails? Or what do you mean that I don't have this kind of looping structure or whatever, right? And the thing to understand, and I think maybe developers, depending on their history, don't realize this, is that a traditional environment has different constraints. Yes, your code is more flexible. Yes, you can do more what you want. But guess what? The cost is different too, and developers don't always see that, right? Like if you're running a server, then you've got all that cost associated with the server. If you're using some serverless execution model, you're paying for compute time, memory, things like that. And the more complex your code is, the more expensive it will be to run. So the constraints are, every language, every technology has constraints, and you just have to acclimate to the different constraints and understand proper design to work around the constraints of the particular platform you're working on. The third one, the final one I'd say, is that I think in the context of an organization, making change is really hard, right? So if you're in an organization where you've been working on a particular technology stack and you're very comfortable in that stack, maybe it's on like on-premise infrastructure or something like that, then convincing people to go this route, I think is sometimes a hard sell because there's just a lack of comfort. And to those people, I would say, again, the experimental approach is the right one. It's very satisfying to just go build something small and see how it works. And then you can see how that fits in your organizational culture over time. But I believe the tools do a very good job convincing. Like if you get someone who's been using spreadsheets or has been using whatever, and they really get into this, they're going to be an advocate, I think, in all likelihood. So that's what I would think about, both from the development perspective as well as from an organizational perspective.
Right. So developers, if you're looking to transition, then you know what to do and you know how to go about it. All right. So our next question is the benefit of low code to organizations and businesses in general. So it could be the projects that you've worked on or the use case that you've seen around in general, right? How do you think low code being used in the application development spectrum is actually beneficial? How does it translate in the real world?
Yeah, I think that this is related very much to what we were talking about at the beginning in terms of more rapid development, in terms of broader access. Well, the way that it helps really is one, of course, by reducing costs, right? When you have workflow automation in place, when you have tools that match your processes in place, generally things should be less expensive. Uh, and you're also, here's the big advantage when you have a really custom process over using an off-the-shelf tool, is that you can make changes. You're in control. If your process needs to change, you can change the software with it. And your process can be reinforced by the software. That's something I think about a lot, is how do we build software that reinforces good process? And that means you can change it too. It allows for better collaboration because you can have cross-functional teams working on these things. Again, you don't need to have it segmented out. It can be, you can have business users involved in development. A couple projects I can give specific examples for. Actually, my very first creator project, I was working with a translation and interpretation agency that was using CRM for managing their vendors and their contacts and things like that. But they had this very complex bidding process where they needed to select translation vendors, send out samples of the project, request quotes, and then manage the work of that project. We built a creator app to do all that, right? And it was tightly integrated with CRM. So they were able to start from the CRM and with the vendors that were in their CRM, send email requests and get bids back and manage that whole thing. I mean, tremendous cost savings because previously pretty much all of that was manual, phone calls, emails, things like that. Now it is automated in such a way that humans are still driving the process, right? It's not hands off, but it's button clicks and presentations. It's not like, okay, I have to type an email now, or I have to pull up this template or whatever. We've worked extensively with custom quoting apps. We're getting more into portals now too, which is a nice feature in a lot of low-code apps where you don't need to pay for user licenses outright necessarily, and so you can build a way of sharing limited data with the outside world according to people that you asked to sign up. So we've been doing more portal work lately too. But really, I mean, the sky is the limit here as far as use case. If you've got it in your imagination, you can bring it into the world with a low-code tool, definitely.
Right. And how long did it take for you guys to work on this particular project?
The translation one, I would say, was over the period of a couple months, but it was iterative, right? And this is another really great thing about low-code, actually. It's the kind of environment, this will make maybe some of the old school PMs a little nervous, but it's the kind of environment where you can embrace change rather than be allergic to change. And for me, that has made a tremendous difference in terms of like our relationships with our clients and ultimately the good work that we produce, because we can iterate and get the right thing, the right software that will actually be used, not deliver features that will never be touched. And so, yeah, a couple months with some iteration.
Awesome. All right. So could you tell us your role as a Zoho partner and a developer and how your experience has been with low-code platforms in general and also with Zoho Creator?
Sure. Yeah, I am the Zoho team lead for AspenTech CRM. I'm actually new in this role. For the past 2.5 years, I have been the developer team lead, managing developers, and now I'm also working with our trainers, our project managers, our analysts. It makes sense because as we're talking about, in some sense, everyone is becoming more of a developer now, right? Like the whole team is engaged in the implementation of solutions. But as a Zoho partner, we exist to create software solutions to make business simpler. That's what we're all about. We're looking for those opportunities to simplify businesses and organizations to make their lives better. We collaborate with our clients, we form trusting relationships, understand their needs, and then we develop innovative automated solutions to improve their systems. And then we educate them on the systems we've built. And we do all this on Zoho. Zoho is not our reason for existing, but of all the platforms out there, it is the one we have chosen to carry this mission on. And we feel like it's the best suited on the market today for this work. And so my experience with Zoho is broad ranging. I mean, especially if there is automation in the program, in the application, I am no doubt well versed. So I build creator applications, I build custom automation in tools like CRM and in books and desk and you name it. My experience really ultimately has been to understand our clients' needs and to deliver something that improves their business. That's what we set out to do as developers here and all our other team members too.
Awesome. We are honored that you think that Zoho is the best and you chose that amongst all the other products. We're honored. One last question to you is, if you could build anything, all right, anything on a low-code platform, be it any low-code platform for that matter, what would you choose and why?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I come from retail, coffee retail. Prior to being in software, that was where I worked, and I see a great need actually in that sector because small retailers are often priced out of solutions. I know that from my time in operations there, that we would talk to people like if it was scheduling software, if it was inventory management or any of those kinds of things, very often the pricing is set up for your large retailers. And it was just unaffordable for people who are selling cups of coffee to make a living. And so I've got a fair number of ideas in that space, and some of those we've explored a little bit. But yeah, I mean, if you're a coffee retailer, you're in my heart. I feel like there's a lot that can be done, and low code is definitely something that segment should look into, in my opinion, because I feel like the pricing is a great fit, especially with portals and things like that, where they don't have to pay for a user license for each part-time employee, things of that nature.
Right. Someday maybe you would be bringing out a solution. We never know, right?
Hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
Hopefully. All right, Christopher. So, one advice or one tip that you would like to give to upcoming developers, right? Just one piece of advice based on your experience.
Yeah, I would come back to what I said a little bit ago, which is do not tie yourself to a particular piece of knowledge of a particular technology. Don't let who you are be defined by your knowledge of someone's technology. Master what you're working on today. Definitely, but also look ahead and see where your knowledge fits and what's coming. Because our industry has a history of rapid change, and that seems to only be increasing, in my opinion. And I think every developer needs to consider what their contributions are to the industry long term. And being hyper focused on a particular technology, I think just kind of anchors you in a particular moment in time, and is not helpful for you or really for the world. So master your work today, but look ahead, I would say.
All right. Thank you so much, Christopher. Thank you so much for the very insightful conversation, I would say, and also a lot of wisdom that you gave to developers. Thank you so much for your time. We really
It was a
appreciate it.
pleasure. Thank
Thank you.
you.
And I would also like to thank all the people who've joined this session. We really hope that you found this interview very informative. And for all things low code, you can stay tuned to us on Zoho Creator's LinkedIn page. And thank you so much for participating. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.